pretty miserable childhood, and the only place of refuge was the cinema. It was a complete escape, and where fantasy could reign supreme. And I really, as a child, identified very strongly with all the movie characters, which is, I'm sure, why the movies were and are so popular. Well, this was the very first of the Hollywood series, and I wanted to do Valentino because I thought it'd be lovely to do a romantic cult hero from the very first days of the cinema, as opposed to some of the other images, which were gangster and violence images. This is the most recent of the movie series. It was done a year ago. I think it's probably the most subtle of all the movie prints. There came a stage in doing all the movie images where I thought it's time to turn the lens more inward. And so I thought I'd go back into my own family background and my own emigration to America, and subsequent emigration to England. I was born in Germany, arrived in the United States when I was 2, along with my parents. We arrived in New York 1 month before the Second World War broke out, having left everything behind in Germany. Ellis Island, about 1907, 1910. I was trying to capture something of the humiliation that the immigrants had to undergo when they were being examined to enter, as it were, paradise. I'm going to make a print of Al Capone because, in my mind, albeit he was a gangster, in some communities, gangsters, criminals, and even terrorists are heroes. Although I'm not Italian, I feel that all immigrant groups have certain things in common, even cult heroes. Now, whether that cult hero is Humphrey Bogart, as in the movies, or Al Capone, seems to me to be a very small distinction. I decided I'd use this particular photograph because it would make a very strong, bold image. But before I could do anything about that, I decided I had to make a drawing in order to absorb the image and make it mine. My next problem was deciding how many colors and which colors to choose. In order to do that, I had to make a tracing of the original photograph in color. That gave me the key for just how many colors I needed. I then proceeded with the first screen, which was to be a graph screen, to simulate prison netting. The next color was to be a flesh tone. Subsequently, I decided I'd have to have a muted stars and stripes, and I decided on a pale gray. The next stencil would be a two-tone blue to bring out the pinstripe suit and the tie, which gangsters wore in those days. And the last color would be a warm brown to tie the whole thing together. I had to make a half-tone screen, which translates the tonality between black and white into gray and captures all the detail of the image. This was the size I finally decided to make the image. I decided the first screen would have to be a graph screen in order to simulate the effect of a prison. Screen printing is a stencil process where the mesh and the screen are open. Ink will actually be pushed through, and where it's blocked, no ink will go through. With the squeegee, flood the screen with ink, and then push the squeegee from the opposite direction, pressing the ink down through the screen onto the paper. Having made the graph screen, I'm now going to make the flesh tone stencil, which is a hand-cut one. Green film is a gelatinous layer adhered to something a bit like wax paper, through which you cut, not the wax paper, removing the areas that you want to print, leaving them open so that the ink can actually go through. Now that I've cut the green film, I will adhere the film to the screen by dampening both the screen mesh and the stencil and ironing very carefully to make sure that there are no air bubbles to prevent good contact between screen and the stencil. I then remove the backing sheet. What's left on is the topmost layer of green film, this gelatinous substance, which is now chemically bonded to the mesh of the screen. I then blue filler the stencil to block out any remaining open bits of the screen. Every print has to be spot on in registration. What I do is adhere a sheet of clear acetate onto the table, put the sheet of paper on which I'm lining up this particular image underneath the clear acetate, and print the image onto the acetate. This table is a vacuum table. The main advantage of a vacuum table is that you're absolutely certain that your paper is held down and doesn't slip, and that's because air is holding the paper firmly down. You then have to shift the paper around underneath the acetate till the two images mesh or marry. Then put down what we call registration lays, which is only a technical term meaning some sort of stops whereby each sheet of paper will fit exactly into the same position time and time again. I'm printing the green film because it is really the lightest color. The traditional thing is always to start from the lightest, working upwards towards dark, and any underlapping will be covered by the darker colors. The next screen will involve making a photographic stencil. I am cutting out the actual stripes of the stars and stripes. Because it's a photographic stencil, there is a reversal process involved in that the area that remains on the clear acetate, in this case red, will be open on the actual screen and therefore allow ink through. And I will print a gray stripe here. This red film is really a positive. I'm now making this positive into a negative, which I will do under an ultraviolet light by contact printing This together with the actual photographic stencil material. This particular photo stencil material, in my situation, needs an exposure time of between 10 and 12 minutes. The next step is to harden this film off with a dilute version of peroxide, mixture 4:1. Once the film is hardened, I wash it very gently with fairly hot water till the image is clear where it should be and opaque where it should be. You have to be very quick at this stage, and you immediately put the wet stencil onto the wet screen, invert it onto a board, weighting it down, and roller off any excess water so that you will have good adhesion. Once the stencil is thoroughly dry, and it's important that it's thoroughly dry, you then remove the backing acetate, checking the screen to see that the film has adhered properly, and then you repeat the blue filler process of gumming out any opened areas, at which time you are now ready to print. I have made 6 screens for this particular image. To proof each color, it can take 10 minutes, it take half an afternoon. It varies. As the thing builds up, one finally sees the horizon in sight. And one knows one's on the right track, and it's finally, the image is taking shape and almost completed. That is very rewarding, because there are a lot of stages before that where you really aren't quite sure where you're going. Well, it's not bad for a first proofing. I think I need to give it a bit more brown and another graph stencil probably. Screen printing certainly is a modern medium in that it only came to fruition in the late 40s. One of the earliest people to use silkscreen printing very successfully was a commercial artist called McKnight Kauffer. His work was stencil-like and flat and used what was available in those early days in a very original way. Ben Shorn was one of the seminal influences in my work in that he was a social realist who was very concerned in the many injustices that he saw around him in the Depression era in the United States. Rauschenberg is another artist I really admire. There's a simultaneity of many, many different events going on in one picture, and therefore he captures the contemporary world.
My early screen prints were actually the learning period of a technique, and they are sharp-cut images about, well, cars, lorries. The Red Line Bus is actually one of the earliest prints I did together with Prater in '69. And to a certain extent, it shows the technique I'm still using, the halftone for the windscreen and part of the headlights, together with a hand-cut tectonic structure, which was a flat color.
I started to work with Chris Prater, the printer, in 1969, coming to London, especially to meet him. Chris Prater, those days, was well known in Germany already by a guitar exhibition.
Chris, thank you. Come on. My interest in architecture started during my time in the St. Catherine's Docks, where I had my studio. This suite of 6 prints is called the London Docks St. Catherine Way, and it was demolished right after I've done it. But I thought this was better expressing my own feelings about the urban surrounding than architectural situations in the center of the town and of nowadays architecture. The thing which interested me first was that this was a kind of architecture opposite to modern architecture, where every function and every meaning was readable from the outside. Looking at those walls of Thomas More Street, you know, it's not so much the wall which is designed by man, but also got all the involvement of time, erosion, which is like the human face. I'm working together with an architect in Berlin, Bernd Rieder, and Ralph Goodbrod, and we traveled to Saudi Arabia, and it was really a travel backwards to the beginning of architecture. We did a photographic sketchbook, and you can see one of those images I've chosen for a print which goes into the portfolio. Chris, this is the actual photograph to start with, and I think that's, as it is the form of the image.
Full page.
Full page, yes. How many separations you think we need?
Well, I think we'll use 4 and give us the opportunity. I think we'd probably get away with 3, but I think we can drop one out anyway.
All right, Chris.
I'll get this out then straight away. We tried to use the camera completely as a tool rather than a reproductive process. We've been combining half-tone stencils with hand-cut stencils. And somewhere in the 71, Gerd brought some photographs that he'd done of St. Catherine's Way in the docks, which presented a complete different problem because the whole thing needed a much more atmospheric and softer attitude. So Gerd, myself and my cameraman Dennis Francis got together and we discussed various ideas, and we came up with doing 3 separate tonal separations on that particular print. We vary them now between 3, 4, 5 tonal separation depending upon the image presented. He exposes on a contact frame different exposures to attain different densities of the image that we're trying to produce. With tonal separation, you're actually using the grain of the actual photograph taken, which gives you an irregular screen as opposed to the mechanical half-tone screen.
2, 3.
Right.
Right, there's the 4.
Well, that one seems rather heavy, covering the background.
Right.
Yes.
Which was, we thought, we only need these 3.
Yes, I think that those 3 bring the relief out.
Right, yeah.
No,
Right.
yes.
Okay, so
Right, I'll
lose
leave
that one and just do these 3.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Fine.
The cameraman enlarges them to the size that we require for the positives, for making stencils.
Right, here's the 3 blow-ups. That's the highlight, middle tone, shadow.
All right, thanks very much, Dan. They're fine? Yes. Let's see if they fit.
Yes.
They fit fine.
Yes, I think the relief's coming out beautifully.
Yeah.
Yes.
So cut the background
Yes.
and touch out the positives and
Yes,
get the
great.
stencils made
Yes.
straight away, okay? The stencil maker is very proficient in making stencils from all types of positives. He exposes the photographic gelatine film through the positive, which actually produces a negative, giving us the areas which we wish to print through. Printing through a negative screen, of course, one gets a positive image.
I'm a painter. You know, I'm interested in color, and there's bloody good color photographing nowadays. I'm much more prefer, you know, using the color sometimes completely different to realism.
You have to control, you have to watch. You match together with Chris colors. You try them out. It's a combination of what you planned and what you're going to do together with the medium.
We projected 4 steps to print this Arabian wall. The ground color is a flat color, which actually is the front bit of the relief. Then the next step, the photographic step, is modifying the structure of the wall.
Because I think for the next color we have two choices, to try a green or a red color.
Well, should we try the red first of all?
Yes, I think so.
No, it doesn't give the right character. It's too warm.
Yes, the green, somewhere between the two.
Yeah, we have to soften that a lot. Got more transparency.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yes, fine. Okay. Okay, Rick. Wash up and run it, okay?
The next structure is the structure of the wall itself. A shadow color, which could be blue or could be warm. We've chosen red for that, a darkish reddish color. That is leading to the structure of the shadows within the heavy light. And for the last, the deep printing, we have chosen a blue, quite a straight blue, but all colors were mixed transparent, which is very essential. So the ground color looks through. It is an original work, you know, started with a camera. Nowadays, a camera is used for so many things, look into medicine or space. You know, I think it's just one tool, and I see it as a tool.